7-game slate. It felt like an 8-gamer in my mind, but it's 7-gamer.
It
We're going to
depends.
talk
It
about all
depends
the
from where you measure. Sorry, you can tee me up for that
measuring from the
joke, and
base.
that's
It's an
a
8-gamer.
yeah.
That's of
Sorry.
course. Make
Well,
sure.
inner shaft is what they call those. It's not a thing.
I am all disoriented. I'm Chris Spags, joined by the preeminent name in NBA measurement,
Whoa.
Fast Eddie Fear. How are you doing, Eddie?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm excited for DeMarcus Cousins' ball. Like I enjoy a good narrative. I enjoy the spectacle. Like I already love basketball, and then when you add, I'm also a giant thespian. So then when you add some drama and some flair and some arch rivals, some Falstaffian incompetence on top of like I just what can I say? I'm a sucker for NBA basketball. So when statement games and exciting games like this come around, I get legitimately geeked out.
We do have some big games going on, especially the late night hammer games looking extra good according to the Vegas totals. But you know what? Every day is looking good here in daily fantasy when you have the Thrive Fantasy app. Thrive Fantasy, of course, is a new DFS app where players build a lineup made entirely of prop bets of only top tier athletes. You pick 10 props out of the 20, and the less probable a prop is to occur, the more points it's worth. And that's where the game theory lies. So go to bit.ly/Osmo to download the Thrive app. You get $10 on any $10 deposit, $20 on a $100 deposit, and $50 on $200 or more. Check it out. The link is in the YouTube. Hit the like button. Go click the link. Do all that clicking at once. Get it all out of the way for yourself. But join Thrive now. Let's talk about a prop, Eddie, about a guy who was affected by some of the news. Jason Richardson. Oh, boy. That's a throwback. Josh Richardson is out. Jason Richardson is also out. But what a great player he was back in his day. But Josh Richardson is out. Dwayne Wade, over-under on Thrive of 11.5 points. For the over, you get 95. For the under, you get 105. Which way would you go, Eddie?
It doesn't do a ton for Wade for me. Again, Miami is a wonderfully for them, frustratingly for us, deep basketball team. Those minutes will fall like water through cracks in concrete as far as trying to figure out exactly where they go. I don't hate the spot for Dwayne Wade. He's 5,000, 4,800, I think, respectively on the two main sites. So like throwing him in a lineup doesn't hate me, and it's not bad news having Jay Rich out. That makes Justice Winslow a little more exciting, Dwayne Wade a little more exciting. I will take the under based on a matchup that I'm not overly thrilled with. I'll slightly comment on the under. Pretty much, I think that the line is right on. So because of the waiting, I will comment on the under there.
Yeah, I think it's close for me, so I think I'll just take the over because I feel like a little bit left behind from old Josh not being in the lineup.
We should really score this shit. If this is going to be our promo, you or I should get a little blackboard and just put this shit up and do the put it on the board thing. Shout out Matthew Berry. And just be like, let's go. Keep track of this shit throughout the year and play for something because, I don't know.
We should do that because, I feel like we've had some good runs here. We'll start doing it on Monday because I'm not with you on Monday. Whenever our next show is, we'll start doing that. That'll be my promise. We'll start tracking. But yeah, make sure to go download Thrive now and track along with us. I mean, we're not tracking it yet, but we will be. But we've been pretty good on these for the most part this year from when I have paid attention, when I have been playing on Thrive Fantasy. Great site for
decent, I think. Decent at least, yeah.
Yep. So tell me, all right, talk to me about the Heat. Talk about them a little bit up front. This should be a quick one, but Josh Richardson being out, does that affect anybody? Does it give you a little more love? I know Hassan Whiteside jumped out in NBA Wowie. 100-plus minutes this year without both Josh Richardson and Goran Dragic on the floor. 1.54 fantasy points per minute.
Yeah, the way the ball, this would take a while, but the way the ball gets brought up by the different point guards on that team actually makes for sort of a fascinating, not terribly useful, but fascinating study of how it's different when you see Jay Rich bring the ball up versus Justice Winslow versus Dwayne Wade versus Tyler versus all the guys. Actually, the offense functions differently with each of those guys as opposed to how likely they are to immediately kick out to the wing as opposed to run around the screen to the wing. And you just end up with certain situations that end up advantaging Whiteside more. And taking those other guys out of the point guard situation would, for me, be a not irrelevant but not killer bonus of, plus 6% or something to his production. All told, I like Hassan Whiteside in this spot. I think it's more likely. I mean, the biggest bugaboo with Whiteside is minutes. Like, a matchup is important. I'd much rather have him going against Brooklyn than against Utah. And I'd much rather have him going against other teams than against Detroit, for example. But the biggest thing is, how many minutes do we think he gets? And the removal of Josh Richardson actually does translate into minutes for Hassan Whiteside, as weirdly as that sounds, just because there are a number of guys from Derrick Jones Jr. is a good example, but there's a number of guys on that team who play the 2 and the 3, or the 3 and the 4, or the 4 and the 5, and so it just does trickle down a little bit, not hugely, but it's relevant. And this is just that big-ass Detroit front court where it's like, okay, we need our bigger guys out there longer, so it's a situation where I have Hassan Whiteside for 31 minutes right now, where normally I would average him out and project him for about 27. So, especially at his reduced price, it's not a tremendous matchup, but right now I have him for like 31 minutes and 36 fantasy points. That feels pretty good, and there's obviously a ceiling on top of that. Some dangerous. I am apparently the head-to-head center basketball whisperer, so I had a number of people today be like, "Oh man, Andre Drummond's been really, really good against Miami in the past." And while that is true, Whiteside didn't play 2 of the 3 really good games Drummond was in, and in the third one, I don't think Blake was present. There were just so many extra mitigating factors where, yeah, Drummond beat the shit out of Bam Adebayo a couple times just as a size discrepancy and had, I think, 20 games in both those games. Putting Whiteside out there makes them both fine. They do both have a real upside. You can catch 40 out of Whiteside. You can catch 45 out of Whiteside. You can catch 50 out of Drummond, but they're not stellar because just the fact the other guy is gobbling up some fairly significant amount of rebounds does put enough of a sort of a stamp on the top end of that super ceiling curve where I'm not, over the moon for either guy. But yeah, for the Heat, I like Justice Winslow a fair amount now. You can tournament punt Dion Waiters at this point, who I now have bumped up to 21 minutes, and obviously is cheap enough where I think he now crept ahead of Justin Holiday in my wing under 4K if I really, really had to rankings. I'm not super excited about it, but he creeps in there now. And Derrick Jones Jr., probably a little more excited to play him instead of, say, Waiters on Yahoo, where I think he's the flat 10, and the scoring trends more towards him, where over the last couple of years he's developed a real steal tendency that should be loved and nursed.
Actually, apparently yesterday was Dwayne Wade's birthday. I'm seeing now because of our guy Dave.
That's right, 37. Try not to suck any dicks on your way through the parking lot. Sorry, but we've had that joke come up about 5. We can't get away from that joke on the show. So there it is, Shadow Clerks.
So happy birthday, Dwayne Wade. Maybe a little bit more impetus for him, but I don't think it matters at this point.
I don't think the day after his birthday. If you honestly told me, I would say it's negative. I have no data to back this up, but simply because on my birthday there tend to be hours of late night activity of either some exertion or dehydration or possibly both. I would gather it's generally a downtrend. If I get an extra year of my life, and this will never happen, I'll go through and track every NBA player's performance on every other day versus the day after their birthday. But I would guess negative if you told me it was going to swing 1% either way.
Yeah, Dwayne hitting the town hard in Detroit last night, going to all the abandoned factories. And
well, you might have been hitting something else in the hotel room. That was sort of what I was alluding to. But...
Oh, no. Gabrielle Union's a beautiful woman, has his baby back home.
Yeah.
Tell me about another guy. Actually, let's talk about another guy who's also affected by injury. Ante Zizic projected to be the highest owned player on the slate on DraftKings, and I believe on FanDuel as well. 50% projected ownership on DraftKings, 25% more reasonable on FanDuel. What are you doing with Ante Zizic here? It's a spot where there are literally no other bigs left unless we want to count Channing Frye, but I don't for the Cavaliers.
Well, yeah. So I like Ante Zizic as a player. I'm in Ohio, and I actually have one friend who literally has spent 3 years destroying my Facebook with, why won't they give Ante Zizic more time? It's absolutely the worst thing. Like, doesn't matter who else was there. It's like, oh my God, Ty Lue originally, and Ty Lue was there for years. Zizic is the best center on the roster. Will you give him time? It was like my Facebook feed every morning for years. I'm like, man, this guy's got an obsession. Anyway, I do generally like him as a player. He's a very solid guy. That works as a reasonable foil to Gobert. Like, if you were going to... If Tristan Thompson was perfectly healthy and you decided we're going to start Ante Zizic here, I would have absolutely no issue with that. So, DK 3,700 is objectively a very good price. That being said, not hard to imagine he gets into a little bit of foul trouble against Rudy Gobert. And there's a lot of other value. And 50% is a, big number because it's just a big ass number. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like
that's the kind of analysis you only get here.
I'm just sitting here trying to figure out how to finish that sentence, and I'm like, that's half lineups. Like all you need is the guy to like. So generally, I would, as the first hint of the upcoming daddy, like, yeah, I don't think I would want 50% if I'm playing a pile of lineups. If you're building one lineup, which is still what more people than not are doing when they listen to the show. Like literally, if there's 1,200, 1,500 people listening to the show, more than half of them build a lineup. And I feel like we sort of over talk about the if you're building 150, because that's fine, that's important, and those people are obviously overexposed and represent a greater proportion of our paying audience at awesemo.com. But if you're building one lineup, I probably don't have Ante Zizic in it. Like, what are you fading? That he puts up 40, which is possible versus Gobert, but pretty goddamn unlikely. I think they'd like him to play 32 minutes. Due to foul trouble and other concerns, I'm not sure that happens. As you mentioned, the other options there are not thrilling, whether you're trying this fun Darren Blossom game at center, Channing Frye. Like, it's going to get real ugly in a goddamn hurry if Zizic can't stick to the court. But yeah, like, so I'm totally fine to go there, especially on FanDuel. Like, I kind of like playing him on FanDuel instead of Cousins if we still project Cousins to be massively more owned. But if they were similar ownership, I would rather spend $400 extra on FanDuel and play Cousins pretty significantly for me. Because you were literally, you were not really exaggerating when you say best possible matchup for Boogie, worst possible matchup for Zizic. That should, factor into the calculus a little bit.
Yeah, Cousins projected for 5% more ownership on FanDuel, 30% versus 25% for Zizic. So
yeah, for me,
could get some.
Yeah, let's talk about Cousins for a little bit here. So I have scraped together, and I spent a while literally canvassing the internet for every little bit of practice footage. Obviously, the famous dealing up with Durant we saw recently, rehab updates, everything. At the pace of this game, I have some concerns. There's going to be some movement. His lateral movement doesn't look 100%. His defense is going to be a bigger issue than his offense to me. But it's still a pretty massive spot. Right now, reading between the tea leaves and the same Steve Kerr comments everyone has heard, I currently have him at 22 minutes and 30 fantasy points. For me, that makes him a pretty strong play on FanDuel. Very, very, very dicey on DK. Like, it is the upside. Like, if we expect the ownership on DK to be anywhere 15-20%, I'll just look at other guys. Like, you really need the minutes to go well and the production to go well and the games to stay close for him to do 22 minutes, 40 fantasy points. Is that possible? Sure, but just keep in mind, this is a really nice spot for Steph and Clay and Durant, and I don't expect all those guys to just sit there and do nothing most of the evening, so FanDuel, pretty big fan. Both DK and Yahoo certainly disinclined towards in my first lineup if we expect him to engender any significant ownership. But yeah, so that's sort of my take there. I expect him on the offensive end of the court, especially given the opposition, to be largely unfettered. So I think looking at him as producing 1.3, 1.4 fantasy points per minute is not a specious or unreasonably arrived upon calculation.
If you had to guess, my guess would be that because I saw Kerr said he's going to be playing in short bursts. Short bursts to me sound like 4-minute intervals.
Yeah.
So like I'm at like 24 minutes with him, assuming he gets the full run, I guess.
Sure. In theory, you get a 24? Slightly abbreviated Embiid rotation, where you get 6 of those 4-minute chunks, where you get the start of the game, the bookend of the first and second quarter, end of the first half, start of the third quarter, bookend of the third and the fourth, close of game. So I think 24, maybe 23. And again, I think they will monitor it. I think if that game, there's a non-zero chance that game just outpaces him, and his ass is running around doing everything he possibly can, and just they're like, hey, it looks like he's laboring a little, and he plays 17 minutes because they don't need him. That would not be a shocking outcome to this game for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting spot. I prefer Zizic on DraftKings just because of the price. And again, like we talked about, there are no bodies there. It's an $1,800 difference on DraftKings, and I am a Zizic believer. Zizic and Zubac, both. I am fans of both of these tall, similarly Z-named European gentlemen. But Cousins, I think if you're rostering him on DraftKings, you're rostering him more for sentimental reasons than you are like his actual potential.
Yeah, I just don't look at him and go like, oh, this seems like a spot he should smash. And like, I think he'll, I don't know, just 5,500 is a point at which if he has any sort of reasonable popularity, there's just lots of ways it can kind of go wrong. It could work out. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a really fine spot. If you told me at the end of the night you got 24 minutes and 41 DraftKings points out of DeMarcus Cousins, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that happened. He got there. But I don't think that's, incredibly likely. So it's just purely based on ownership. If he's 5% owned, I think he's brilliant on DraftKings. If he's 20% owned, I think he's kind of unexciting.
Yeah, he's at 16% projected right now, so that's in the range where it's probably not great.
Yeah, he ends up being something similar to, like, Jaren Jackson Jr., which is like might not get the time, might get more time, really depends on foul trouble, might be exceptional, might sort of crap himself, but there is a real upside there. So it's just how much he's owned. Jaren Jackson Jr. when he's like 5-6% owned, is one of the best fantasy plays on the day. It was like Kyle Lowry yesterday. People were jumping up and down on Josh for a bit, who I said one thing in Slack yesterday, which was Kyle Lowry is easily the best play of the day. Then the game started, and he was dreadful for the first quarter and really the first half, and only really ground his way to a decent fantasy line in the low 40s. But clearly, 25 or 30% owned Kyle Lowry on a short slate was easily the best play on the slate. When it doesn't matter whether he ended with 30 or 57. That was the best play on the slate. DeMarcus Cousins at 4% would be one of the best plays on the slate, even if he's playing 23, 24 minutes. At 20%, he ends up being very meh. But there is still an upside there. So it's just a very similar situation where you got to find guys with an upside who aren't going to be owned, and people are very excited to roster him tonight. I don't blame them, but look elsewhere.
Yeah, I would have been with you on Kyle Lowry too. I had like 80% of him in my lineups yesterday, just because when you get that news that late and what he does without Kawhi, it did make sense. And he got there. I was happy to see he got there, but it was weird. He played like he didn't want to play.
Tyler Johnson is starting. It's a little peculiar.
Ooh. Okay. Does that change anything for you?
Puts TJ in play a little bit. I have to check his prices. I don't remember Tyler Johnson's price. If he's back around the 4K now, like he was up, hanging at 52 for a while. Again, this is a really deep team with lots of guys. He's 39 on DK. I'm perfectly fine with that as a punt. FanDuel, where if he's around that price, will actually make a pretty interesting punt for me at that point. I would have some degree of interest just because your ability to drop a guy on FanDuel. Sorry about that. Took me a little while to get it loaded. He's the exact same price. So he's $3,900 on both of them. Let me see. Oh, I do have Yahoo open. And I have a spreadsheet in here somewhere. Tyler, the creator there, is 11. So, best on FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel makes a perfectly interesting punt. I imagine you are looking at something in the range of 24 minutes. It isn't a matchup that I'm super, super excited for, but makes an interesting pivot away from Bryn Forbes, who's probably the cheap point guard of note on FanDuel right now. So, I'd have a fair bit of interest in that. I think that's kind of fun.
We were talking about DeMarcus Cousins. Let's talk a little bit more about the Golden State Clippers game. It is the game with the highest total on the slate, a projected 241.5 points from Vegas. Not a lot of value on the Golden State side, unless we're going to count DeMarcus Cousins, which we probably shouldn't. On the Clippers side, though, guys look a little more appealing to me. Danilo Gallinari coming up quite a bit. Tobias Harris. Montrezl Harrell coming up the most for me by far. What are you feeling about this game, and how would you try to game stack it if you were going to do that?
I am Montrezl Harrell, and this is apparently where I'm different from everyone else in the industry, pretty far behind both Tobias Harris and Lou Williams.
Really?
I really like those guys more, especially with the addition of DeMarcus Cousins chewing up some bit of time and even some bit of bench time there. Like, it just... I don't mind Montrez. He's obviously looked really good again. But the way these two teams play against each other, I really like Tobias Harris in his role in this game, and he's looked good in the past. I like Lou Williams, who's been very good against this modern incarnation of the Warriors. We will call it. Montrez, I can see having some difficulty, and apparently he's going to be higher owned than both those other guys, and the price isn't brilliant. He is outright more expensive than both of those other guys on both sites and higher owned. So I will take cheaper, less expensive guys. I project to do a little bit better. So I would rather have Tobias Harris for 200 less on FanDuel and 100 less on DK. I would rather have Lou Williams for 1,200 less on FanDuel and 600 or 700 less on DK than a somewhat expensive Montrez. Now, there's all the upside in the world. He's just a guy who can rim run the whole game. Certainly, I'm worried about his defense. I mentioned on Cousins and his lateral mobility, and Harrell's a big activity guy, so I'm not specifically objecting to it, but just because I like those other guys quite a bit, and there's direct leverage between them and Harrell as far as production goes. I would rather play those other guys.
I'm playing a good bit of Harrell, so I mean, this comes with really no backing with my own dollar. But I'm actually a little bit more worried for Harrell going against Kevon Looney in the second unit than I am him going against Cousins, because Cousins is going to be limited by the Achilles thing. I think his lateral movement is going to be affected the most right up front. As somebody who's torn an Achilles before, I feel like that was one of the things where I felt right. Obviously, like you walk in a straight line, once you try to pivot around, it feels a little more
Yeah,
janky.
yeah,
And he's a big dude.
and the video I've watched makes that them really bears that out. You can tell. I've never torn an Achilles, knock on wood, but I've done almost every other major leg injury a human being can, and no one gives a shit about my body. But long story short, yeah, there's just certain things you can't do, and one of them is defending guys who are jumping all the hell around the basket and being very active, like Red Tips does there. So yeah, so yeah, I'm not thrilled with the matchup with Looney either, who's handled him fairly well in the limited time they've been on the court against each other. So, I'm fine with Harrell. And again, the pace is out the goddamn window. So it's not like there's really anyone in this game where you can't just be like, well, 242 or whatever the pace number sits at. So everyone, as far as even like a now slightly priced up Pat Beverly to Avery Bradley, is going to have to see a little extra time because his defense, and I think plays 30 minutes. Dude, there's really no one playing in this game that I don't think versus their ownership makes a perfectly good GPP play. But I would rather play, for my interest in playing them in a tournament, it probably goes Lou Williams, Tobias Harris, Montrezl Harrell, Gallinari, in that order.
That seems fair. And don't sell your body short, Eddie. Your body is a wonderland. We all know that.
Thank you, John.
How about the other high-scoring game at the end of the slate? I just had to get that in there. Once you said my body, I was like, I just need to say the John Mayer line.
Batty. Say it like John Mayer. Batty.
The show might be taking a turn between all the daddy things and referring to your body as a wonderland, but whatever, I'm here for it. Let's talk about the New Orleans game heading into Portland. Another game with a very high total above 233. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a guy who is probably going to stand out. So a lot of people know James Harden on the slate. Ownership here pretty spread out. A lot on Lillard, slightly more than Anthony Davis expected. Nurkic not far behind. McCollum picking up some as well. Pretty decent value on DraftKings. How are you feeling about this game, and which guys are the best to you?
Yeah, this game is fascinating with me because they both play each other very differently in the regular season than the postseason. So in the postseason, you got this ridiculous Drew Holiday is going to absolutely wear the shit out of Damian Lillard. And he just sat on his goddamn head for 4 games and started this national conversation that a lot of us who have been longtime Drew Holiday proponents were like, yeah. That was like, this guy's amazing, because he was just running the goddamn court in that entire postseason series, where, of course, they notably, the Pelicans won in the sweep as the lower seed. So, and then they've played again, I believe, exactly once this year, and it didn't really go that way again, and the cuffs were off Lillard, and he managed to go do his thing, and everyone was just a little bit more chill. So I don't know exactly how this works out. You end up with a really wide range of outcomes for Lillard and McCollum, who gets a big boost when, again, the best defender on the other team is just squashing the shit out of the normal alpha to all these guys. So Anthony Davis, you want to run him up in a tournament on FanDuel? That's fine. It's not what I consider a good environment for him. Aminu does a decent job on him. There's other guys. I still project him for, 65 plus fantasy points, but it's a spot where I'd be surprised if you got the 90 out of him with Mirotic back and all hands on deck for that team. Like, there's nothing to promote this being a great spot for him. DraftKings entirely different, 11-7. If you're going to get your exposure, yeah, do it there. That price is still much more attractive, and there's enough value floating around. You can pretty easily justify that. But again, Drew Holiday, 8K on DK, that makes a lot of sense. He's very much playable in even cash, where he pretty rarely doesn't get to 40. His steals have been high even for him recently, where he had 4 steals and 3 steals. But 8,800 on FanDuel, you're starting to price out the upside. And again, bringing Mirotic back is not an irrelevant concern for me, just as far as usage goes. So, Mirotic's presence pushes Etuan Moore really out as someone I want to play. When he was, sort of the number 4 option on the court at most times, I could get behind it at 4K when he was going to play 30, 32 minutes. And he had, I want to say, 3 or 4 35-plus fantasy point games this year. That made sense. It's getting increasingly unlikely with the people they're running out there now, especially against Portland. So not a lot of interest there. We've seen these games recently where he closes and Elfrid Payton doesn't close. So I like Elf. It's a decent spot for him, but because they're messing with his minutes so much, he's really, you're sort of stretching as a tournament play. I still like Mirotic. At 6K, there's just too much upside for that. And again, has largely been good against them. You've had multiple 50-point games. Was good in the playoff series. I think they have a number of very decent games for him.
Killed him on the Bulls too last year, I think.
Yeah, and so Mirotic probably at price among Pelicans. My favorite still in tournaments. I would be worried about Randall. There was some foul trouble last game, and that had something to do with it. But I do think with full-strength Mirotic around, his average role is 28 minutes off the bench. So at that point, can he get on top of that at 7,500? Sure, but when I don't think there's a realistic possibility or realistic likelihood that he's going to get 33, 34 minutes, at that point I'd probably look at other options. If you have 150 lineups, yeah, by all means, it's fast game. I have a couple shares of Randall, but I'm significantly down on him. I would rather play the other 3 Pelicans players of notes. Is it worth it for Jusuf Nurkic today? Yeah, I think so, especially at the DK price of 8,200. Again, ends up being played largely differently depending on how he gets schemed against. I think Mirotic back actually ends up netting out and helping him in a little bit. But he's just looked really good, and not unlike Whiteside in that a lot of his production and value and how I appraise him is based on how I expect the minutes to unfold. And they've been really good recently, and they really seem to sort of be embracing him. It's like, oh yeah, this guy is really good. We could just treat him like the goddamn starting center, and make that his role and go forward from that point. So, yeah. So their takes on that game.
Yeah, I think that checks out. Mirotic is the guy who I was on the other night, and I was really happy to because I just figured he was due for a bounce back. We talked about it on the show. I just felt like he was due for a bounce back, and it ended up working out. But I think Randall's an interesting pivot play today because we're going to see some ownership on Mirotic, not as much as I thought, but some ownership on Mirotic, some ownership on Davis, some ownership on Davis. I think it might be a time to go to Randall if you want to be contrarian, but try to get some taste of that potential upside there. But that's probably the only reason. I agree that there's a lot of ways it could go sideways for Randall with the minute squeeze going on.
I'm really happy that I've popularized the phrase "could go sideways" here, because no one used to say that shit, and then I keep saying something's gonna go sideways, and then I feel like everyone on this channel says it. I feel like that's my fault. Not that it hasn't existed in the universe as a whole well previous to my application, but I just feel like I did that.
I feel like we've said that before I started doing shows with you, but I can't confirm that because every day blends together in a horrific nightmare.
It's sort of an old man saying, which is why I'm giving myself some degree of exposure to saying, like, I don't think that was me, because that's a very, you whippersnapper.
Yeah, but Josh also has some Nana phrases too, which I feel like could be trickled down.
Interesting.
We're at the halfway point. We are going to get to some questions of the premium Slack, but we are at the halfway point. That is a time when we do a little halftime Daddy Likes, see where ownership is standing and what Eddie's feeling about it right now, where we're both feeling about it, but mostly Eddie because there's only one Daddy or something. We only have one Daddy. Use promo code Live Before Lock right now to get 50% off of Osmo.com. Your first month on there, half off. All of Osmo's projections or all of his rankings and ownership projections, as well as projections that you can just plug right into Fantasy Cruncher from Josh Engelman, and of course Eddie's rankings as well on there. So go check it out. The deep dive column as well every day from Adam and Lofty doing a great job. Use that promo code Live Before Lock, get 50% off.
I can't believe you would disrespect my 2 dads like that, but
you know what? You're right. And even Full House, which ostensibly was similar.
Yeah, you could even make an argument that 3 men and a baby would apply in this context.
You know what? Okay. Multiple dads can exist. Maybe not multiple daddies. There's only one daddy, but any girl can have a father, but it takes a special man to be a dad.
Good call. I like that. It's a broad spectrum.
Yeah, that's on my Hallmark card for the Father's Day. Let's talk about the top owned guys. We talked about Ante Zizic a little bit, but give me your thoughts one more time. 50% ownership, 3,700 on DK. How does Daddy feel?
I guess Daddy doesn't like 50% is a giant ass number for a center playing against Rudy Gobert. End conversation. Like he is objectively too cheap. With what I expect him to play, he should cost like 5,500 or 6,000 tonight. Like he is way too cheap. But there is just, it doesn't really have that much to do with projection as opposed to just chance of abject failure, and it's a big chance. Like, it can go badly, and it's really not hard to imagine how. So, yeah, I'll go with that. He doesn't like it at 50%. Again, feel no issue if you have him in every single lineup because he can't hurt you that much, but I would rather try to find a guy who's going to do a little bit more for you.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm playing a ton of Zizic, but I like the guy, and whatever. It is what it is. I'll go down.
I legit like him. It's just 50% playing center against.
Yeah, no, I get the game theory reasons why. It's usually what happens before we do in the show. I put my lineups in, and I'm like, That's too much, and I'll mute it a little bit as we go. But yeah, Zizic just struck. It's too good to me, and I just when there's no bodies at all, I just got to trust the guy. I feel like that's how I feel about it. Same game, Royce O'Neal, number 2, 23%.
We're on DK where he's like 4,300. That's interesting that he's that high. But, guaranteed minutes in a good matchup. I will still, I guess, say Daddy doesn't like. I would probably want under that number on Royce, who just isn't a real upside guy. And I do believe in projecting blowouts. Like, I actually still do not understand how someone is like, yeah, I just don't worry about blowouts. And I know a lot of people who I really respect and trust who do that. And they go like, look, I project my guy for the game staying close, and those are the numbers I use. I don't know how we do that. Like, the game line there in Utah tonight is, I want to say, 15 points or 16 points. So there is a significant chance your guys don't perform, and I don't know how you don't recognize that in some way. It really shouldn't change their ceiling. Their ceiling is the game stays close and they play 4 quarters. But using round numbers, let's say there's let's use Donovan Mitchell, who at $9,000 is really, really good, I think, if he gets 4 quarters. I'm a big fan of Donovan Mitchell. I think there's a nice ceiling there. I think there's a nice floor there. But I'll round down and say there's a 1/3 chance that this game blows out enough that he doesn't play the 4th quarter. I don't know how you can justify just ignoring that in its entirety. I'm not saying you project it to blow out. I'm saying you factor that in just like everything else we do are odds of this, odds of this, odds of this, odds of this. There's a matrix of possibilities. If you want to ignore blowouts for any game up to a certain point, but if you have, this Atlanta team going into, just I don't know. There's just, for me, I think that it's something should always be counted in there. And for that reason, because I don't think Royce plays in the blowout, I'm a little bit disincentivized, and that's one of a few reasons I will say Daddy doesn't like that either.
Yeah, I think you've listed a ton of valid reasons there for Royce. Damian Lillard, number 3, 22% on DraftKings. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I like it, just because I think the most likely outcome is that Drew does not own his shit, because apparently it is sort of an optional thing that thus far really just gets applied pretty strictly in 4 pro season games and not in 5 regular season games in which they've met over the last 2 years. So I like him a lot. At $8,600, I think is the DK tag, and that's what we're looking at. Also, the Yahoo price is demonstrably too cheap. Drink for the demonstrably drinking game. But that's just too cheap of a number, and it seems like there's some upside on top of that and sort of saved as a cash play. So just too cheap in a game with a lot of pace. I like that. Daddy likes that. Feel free to have that much.
Number 4, Anthony Davis at 21%. Apparently a lot of people stacking up Lillard and Davis, most likely.
Yeah, and that seems fine. I like that too. Saving some time, I will go with Daddy likes that as well.
And number 5, Aaron Gordon, 6,400 on DK, gets 19% ownership.
Yeah, very frustrating in that last game where I just sort of watched the first half, and then he had 20 in the second half, and then there was an overtime, and he did almost nothing in that. So again, that was a very frustrating game for me. Wednesday was a really great day for the show. We were all over Jermichael Green and a number of other really low-owned guys who went off and made a lot of money on that slate. But Aaron Gordon, a guy I liked a lot, who only played half a game, which was very, very frustrating. But yeah, 6,400 is too cheap. He's had ceiling games of over 50 against Brooklyn. That ownership is obviously high, so I'm sort of ambivalent as far as him versus his ownership. That's about where the numbers should be. But at especially that DK price, I'm a fan of AG tonight.
All right, so there you go. So make sure to go check that out. Use promo code LIVE4LOCK for 50% off your first month. Go check the ownership as it updates. I'm sure there'll be one more before we close out here, especially if there's any big news coming. Let's talk about some questions in the premium Slack. I got a question from Legalize for you, Eddie. And he jumps out, if you are a box score watcher and you check the logs, Mike Conley against the Celtics has been a profitable matchup for him at least a couple times in the last year. How are we feeling about Mike Conley today?
Yeah, it was interesting. They the original game this year that those two teams got together in Memphis, I believe. I recall watching that game and being surprised at the level of usage I got out of Conley. Again, this is all off the top of my head, but I seem to recall him having twice as many shots, or as many shots as any 2 other players on the team in that game. I want to say he had 22 shots, and then it was like 11, 7. Like, he really, really ran that shit. So especially at the DK prices, where I think it's 6,800 for Marc Gasol and 7,000 for Conley, I probably slightly prefer Conley for a lower ownership. It's just tournaments for me. You can't talk me into spending that kind of money on a guy like Conley against Boston in sort of a cashy environment. But I do very much like it as a tournament play, and he did seem to be calling his own number a lot, and he's a guy that can do that, and they trust to do that. So, yeah, I think the upside is there. He had, I want to say, 50 fantasy points in that game. Has done good against Boston in the past, interestingly, but not always well against Kyrie. Again, this is top of my head English, but I recall him disappointing in matchups against Kyrie in Cleveland for a while there. So there's a lot going on there, but I do think the upside is real, which is all we're really talking about in this situation. So no in cash for me, but someone I'm a pretty big fan of in tournaments. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just an interesting thought there from Legalize in the chat. Another question about a guy we didn't really talk much about, but Klay Thompson was popular the other night, didn't get value in the usage flow kind of got away from him in the second half. But how are we feeling about Klay in this spot versus the Clippers?
Yeah, we also nutted the order on the Warriors last night, got them correct 1 through 4 with Draymond on top all the way down with Klay on the bottom. Today, as far as the Warriors studs go, I have Durant as my favorite one to roster. We're setting it outside Cousins for this conversation. So I have Durant slightly above Steph, slightly above Draymond. I have Klay on the bottom. Again, they have any number of able defenders against him, even in pace-up spots. Generally hasn't been great against him, whereas he obviously can score 50 real points, and there is that sort of ceiling. It seems least likely the guys to go off tonight. So no, I will keep Klay at the bottom of the guys that I really want to roll out here. Again, I wouldn't kill yourself if you end up with him in a tournament, but I would much rather play Lou Williams, for example.
Yeah, and I also just worry too about all the main guys for Golden State. Like I think there's worries about Cousins as well, but like if he takes just enough off the table, I feel like these aren't guys who are really smashing value a ton, and their prices are up a little bit. It just kind of worries me. I feel like your margins are pretty narrow if Boogie, let's say, takes 20% usage rate and takes just enough where they're not getting enough shots. I don't know. That's my thought process with it, at least.
No, I don't disagree with you. That is a path to failure in this situation, which is just like, oh, everyone got you, because I think that's worth bringing up, because that is one of the larger issues with this as a team in general, which is just mouths to feed. Like the Pacers here, we can probably feed 2 or 3 of these mouths. But in the past, one of the issues has been you would get a game where none of them hit tournament upside because Draymond doesn't happen to get all the steals and blocks or get the 10 points he needs to get there. So he gets whatever, 32, 34, 35. He's sort of not combined with the others. But you have, usage evening out between Steph and Klay and Durant. You get 51 out of Durant and 49 out of Steph and 36 out of Klay, and that's fine. But none of them got there for you. So now you have yet another alpha to speak who can really, demand some degree of usage. When that one costs 4,000 and change, that certainly helps. But you're just dealing with a position where it's like, yeah, it's possible this team scores 130 points tonight and 1 or 0 of these guys ends up being great. So it is a concern. It is more likely that things will not distribute symmetrically. And you end up with, last week you had 70 out of Steph and 50 out of Durant. More likely than not, someone's going to get on top. But certainly your concern would be that none of them outside of Cousins are objectively that cheap, and you need them to hit some sort of upside, and there are only so many points to score in a game. If you want to make an argument for Klay Thompson, it would be that the way their rotations work will frequently leaves him as, the guy on the court who's going to do a lot of the offensive carrying. And that in the event of a blowout, he gets a larger proportion of his real minutes. But
Ray in the premium Slack saying that you're usually pretty good at sussing out the Dinwiddie Russell nights. Which of these guys is more appealing to you today?
I don't know if I'd go there. But in general, I will say Russ is probably the one I prefer tonight. If by sussing out these Dinwiddie Russ nights, I've liked Russ a lot recently because he's had some good matchups and then got rolling and then kept rolling, and he's been good in 8 out of 10 games. Sure, and then just Dinwiddie was shit for a month, and I went, yeah, he's been shit, I'm not playing him. So that's not so much A or B.
I was on Dinwiddie last time, which I was happy with, but I thought the motivational talk by Atkinson did seem like Spencer Dinwiddie's a very emotional guy. That's what I've learned. I remember we talked to Rod Beard, Osmo and I did, and he was talking about how Dinwiddie was real butthurt about leaving Detroit. So whenever Dinwiddie's butthurt, play him. I think is how I feel about it.
Yeah. Anyhow, but I will drag that long way around to say
Russell.
I will go with Russell. I still enjoy him at tournaments at 77 and 73. The price is up there. The matchup isn't supreme, but again, 8 out of the last 10 games. This team, if there's a failing in Kenny Atkinson, who I think I like more as a coach more than other people. I don't love him. I don't think he's a tremendous coach, and his rotations drive me to drink. But he can't get Dinwiddie and Russell to coexist, and that just makes the team worse. And I never get it. Like, Dinwiddie was amazing in that last game, and they kept him on all fourth quarter. He made 3 3-pointers in the last minute of that game to push it to overtime. That's just an incredible performance for him. Why the hell does D'Angelo Russell, who is your second or third best player, especially with Karis LeVert hurt, not play the fourth quarter in overtime? He played 25 minutes. You can play 2 good guards. You can put them both out there. Like, can you imagine Golden State if they're like, oh, sorry, Steph's having a good game, Clay. You're going to sit, and we're going to leave, Pat McCall, or, well, he's moved twice since then, but we're going to leave, Sean Livingston out there to just sort of watch. It's like, run both those goddamn guys together in the fourth quarter. There's no reason they both can't play 36 minutes, a la any number of successful guard tandems in the NBA. So, very frustrated that it was like, oh, Dinwiddie's going off. I guess Russ is dead. Then, like, the other team would not just have to guard the one guy who's going Super Saiyan mode. They'd actually have to pay attention to both of them. So, I never quite get that, but that appears to be the case more often than not. And just because it's been more often the other way and people are slaves of recency and people will be more inclined to spend $1,600 less or what have you, or $2,000 less depending on the site. Sure, I will go the other way. And I would go back to Russ tonight just in general. Which one of those players I would rather play would be deloading.
Yeah, Russ always a risk with defensive assignments. Whenever he blows a defensive assignment, he's getting that hook the second it goes down from Atkinson, which is not the best for a player's flow and confidence. But I agree. There's some weird things, but they're a fun team to watch. The Nets play hard, which I feel like you can't say about every show.
And it is also worth pointing out that they've really solidified their rotations. Like, I still despise them on back-to-backs, where I don't know why the hell Atkinson really thinks that that's the way to do that. But anyway, so yeah, I have real issues with them on back-to-back still, but there have been a couple games where they're running like a tight 8-man rotation all of a sudden. Like, I'm spending a lot of attention looking at them. There's still a lot of moving pieces. It isn't a great matchup. Trying to figure out, how many do I get out of Rondé Hollis-Jefferson tonight? What goes on with Kurucs? Is Trevion Graham going to start again? There's a lot of shit going on there, and not a ton of upside, and there's some sort of even spread. So I think we look at the 2 alpha guards. I think we look at Jared Allen as being solid guy in tournaments who obviously possesses a lot of upside. We've seen that recently. I don't think you continue to get 30 whatever minutes out of Jared Allen, or not much more than 30. Ed Davis was not looking good last game, so they sat him down with 3 fouls in 7 minutes, and they were just like, oh, screw it. And I believe Jared Allen played the entire second half. That will happen, but it is the exception and not the rule. So it's also worth pointing out, no one is on the back end of a back-to-back tonight. The Celtics, the Cavs, the Pistons, the Grizzlies, the Heat, and the Magic all play tomorrow. So for my solo show tomorrow, we will have 6 back-to-backs to deal with. But, when thinking about those teams tonight, again, Celtics, Cavs, Pistons, Grizzlies, Heat, and Magic, guys, I have a little more concern about, hey, if this game begins to go sideways, shout out, a little more inclined to be careful with my exposure.
K-Shep Killicam asking, Ellenson and Lure are out. Does that do anything for Stan the Man Johnson? It does not for me. I only care when Griffin's out personally, but what do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, it now makes him a reasonable punt for me. I think on FanDuel now I'm happy putting him in there because he is going to just pick up more back-to-back minutes on a couple positions. I think he himself is probable right now, unless we've gotten Stanley is definitely playing. As memory serves, he was, I think, coming in with some sort of designation. But yeah, sticking all that together, I don't mind Stan now on FanDuel where he's back to the minimum, and there's a chance he gets 25 minutes and he's shown the ability to get an upside. But FanDuel only, and not a great matchup, and certainly a guy who can disappear. But I do think Stan is the guy to whom I look with all that news coming out.
This is a question that we talked about earlier up front, but I feel like we have probably some new people tuning in. Who would be the biggest beneficiary of Josh Richardson out? We talked about the Heat, but give me your 5-second take on this.
Yeah, I don't mind Justice Winslow, especially in this matchup. He isn't super upside guy very frequently. The pace isn't everything we want here, but with him bringing up the ball that much more often and sharing it with one other guy as opposed to potentially 3, so Tyler Johnson is getting the start. That makes the most sense now. Certainly very happy with him on FanDuel at 3,900. He makes an excellent punt there. I legit like him quite a bit on FanDuel. He's in play on DK. I'll be surprised if the minutes totally starts with a 3. I imagine he ends up well lower than that. And when you're forced to sit with the score and there is, a floor there, I don't know how much he touches the ball. Wouldn't surprise me to see pretty low usage out of Tyler Johnson. I think it's a very strong tournament play with the late news, but much less excited than FanDuel there. But a little cookie for Justice Winslow. Derek Jones Jr. now, someone I'm a little more confident in playing. Minor cookie for Dwayne Wade, but it is not earth-shaking news, and no one who's just like, oh shit, gotta play this guy now. So,
Kwame Nation asking, can we go over Teague and Rose without Tyus Jones?
yes, love Teague. More disinclined towards Rose. I'm fine with Rose at his price. Rose is. Let me rephrase. I really like Jeff Teague. I'm fairly ambivalent on Derrick Rose. The matchup looks good for Teague. This entire series, even if we just want to look at just this year, this is actually the swan song for the Spurs and the Timberwolves. This is their 4th matchup this year. This is it. And they've had 2 ridiculous blowouts, one each way, in one quasi-reasonable game. But the one constant in, I think he only played 2 games. I'm almost certain Teague played 2 games, but he looked really good in those games, and he is the type of player I like going at the point against this Spurs team, which is a spot I like to look at a little more. I don't like having Gay back in there for how that affects Rose, the pushing of Aldridge down, all those other things. So I like Teague well more than I like Derrick Rose if I'm forced to play one of those 2 guys.
How does Boogie affect Dre? You would assume it cuts to his rebounding upside a little bit and perhaps the spacing, but Dre seemed really motivated last game, and he seems excited with Boogie being back. So I don't know. How do you feel about him?
I don't think it's terribly relevant because so much of Dre's production comes from other stuff. Like, literally, you're looking at, like, the offense will be, I presume, a little bit more efficient because you're just dealing with, like, 5 ridiculous threats now as opposed to some of the smaller numbers we've been talking about. So I think it affects Draymond least of all the other guys. So I would not be worried about Dre. I think Dre with Looney starting there and Dre with Cousins starting there are not significantly different quantities. I think the offense is more efficient. I think his assist potential picks up a little bit because of that. I think his rebound potential comes down a little bit because of the fact. But especially the way the rebounds work, they won't share all that much time. I think about 14 minutes, if that goes the way I expect.
Would you go with Fournier or Terrence Ross on Yahoo?
I'll go with Fournier at this point. Terrence Ross, in the 4s or something, can gun his way to 30 and get on top of that price. But when those 2 guys are the same price, I'm generally going to go Fournier.
I also would go Fournier, but Terrence Ross, man, he's a good player. He deserves more of a shot. Like, if the Magic fall out of the playoffs, he should get traded to a contender because he's consistent from the mid-range, from 3. Really heated up the other day. I was really impressed watching him. I watch him a lot because I tend to roster him for whatever reason too much, but great headband too. Big Terrence Ross guy.
Great headband.
Lillard or Nurkic for DK GPP?
Yeah, I'll actually go with Nurkic. I think there's just a slightly higher upside of him getting to a slightly higher likelihood of him getting to an upside that makes me really happy in tournaments in this matchup. And the ownership should be a bit lower, I think, for a couple of reasons. So for both those reasons, Nurkic, I think I would rather play in a tournament.
Keyshawn814 asking in the premium Slack, Eddie, what are your thoughts on DeMar?
I like DeMar a lot. I like Aldridge a little bit more. There's a lot of moving pieces here evaluating the Spurs at this point. You have the effect of Gay coming back into the rotation, wondering whether or not he plays, low 20 in minutes again, whether or not that comes up to 25, 27, 28. That ends up being really, his large role ends up being a net negative for both DeRozan and Aldridge, who are both cheaper. It's been tough in the past for DeRozan, but half of that had to do with the blowouts, and another quarter of that had to do with the presence of Covington for a game, and there's just I don't think a lot of the things that have persisted making this a difficult matchup for him are persisting. All told, I will slightly prefer Aldridge to DeRozan, just as far as raw points go, and I expect the ownership to be roughly similar. And I like them both at their prices. I do think they both carry significant upside. We've had some really good games out of Aldridge against Minnesota, against Towns in the past, and he can handle him really well down low. And he's the one who's been in better form recently, so I like DeRozan fine. I think he's a just fine tournament play, above average. I would rather play him than some of the other high-priced shooting guards. I would slightly rather play Aldridge to DeRozan.
This question made me laugh from GQ and Excess in the premium Slack. Quick question. Samuel L. Jackson narrative street tonight. Glass comes out in theaters tonight, and Mr. Glass himself is on the slate. Should we lock AD? That's clever. That is clever in a way many of these jokes and comments are not. So good for you, GQ.
That's excellent. I do not find there to be a significant statistical correlation between movie openings and player injuries.
Viral marketing. Did you watch the Fire Festival documentaries? It's all influencer marketing. That's what we're all about now.
I like it. So funny joke. Don't care.
Jarrett Allen versus Wiggins versus Aaron Gordon. Who gets more raw points on DK?
I will take Gordon out of those, although I do think they are in the same ballpark. And I like all three of those guys in tournaments. Wiggins has just had the increased onus again. I'm a little less excited about all those guys when you have Rose back and Teague back and everything going that way. So I probably prefer Teague the most because he's basically the cheaper of all these players of interest we're talking about, and so much of his production sort of gets enhanced a little bit in a matchup that I already like for his assist upside. Like I think he gets a double with assists tonight. So I like Jeffers a fair amount there. But I don't mind any of those guys you just asked, but I will slightly land with Aaron Gordon with the most fantasy points.
Would you go DeRozan or Drew Holiday for a DK GPP?
On DK, I will probably go with Drew Holiday. Again, right about in that same price tag, but I think that actually ends up being really close for me. Yeah, I have them right in there. I'm a little more inclined to playing Drew Holiday tonight, so I will stick to my guns.
All right. Towns or Vucevic for DK GPP?
For me, I'm going to stick with Vooch. I have no issue with someone playing Towns. It is not what I consider a particularly great spot for him. He has struggled sometimes against Aldridge in the past. This year, which you don't want to look at, because again, you're talking about 2 blowouts. But his 3 fantasy point totals this year are uninspiring against the Spurs in multiple games. Is it possible that he pays off that tag and lays out 60 tonight? Absolutely. I would rather go with Vooch, who I think has a little bit less of an upside. You're not getting 27 and 27 out of Vooch, but a much safer floor and I think a more frequent game that you will be pleased with. So Vooch.
Actually, this is a good question from J Meter 21. This guy popped for me, Bryn Forbes.
Yeah.
Who would you say has more raw points, Bryn Forbes on DK or Marcus Smart?
I have Bryn Forbes about 2.5 points higher. I like Bryn Forbes. Someone alluded to the fact that in one of those Minnesota games he had 40 fantasy points this year, and I immediately said, well, yeah, in another game against Minnesota he had 8 fantasy points this year. So I don't know how much you can draw from single game logs, but there's enough opportunity there. They're trying to give him 30 or 32 minutes, and at a price, especially FanDuel, $4,400 prior to the existence of starting Tyler Johnson, he would have been my favorite pay down point guard. So neither site do I have an issue with you playing Bryn Forbes. He's very, very tolerable at that price.
Yeah, a very weak 3-point difference is why it jumped out. Is why it jumped out to me. But yeah, I guess I forgot that he had that 40-point day. Bellinelli too should get a benefit too. If he heats up in that second unit, he could really bomb on them because they just allow a very good field goal percentage from deep.
Absolutely.
Let's see, raw point. I never did that one. Blake and Gobert or KD and Drummond for a Yahoo GPP?
I'll go Blake and Gobert.
Do you like Blossom Game at all with the potential of a blowout?
Assuming he has minimum price, I think I would rather play Cameron Payne if I'm going to go for blowout guy in that game. But my second one would be Blossom Game. So with that caveat, I think he's fine if you're somehow scripting that. But neither of them are guys that I'm actively trying to get into a lineup because, again, there's obviously a lot of goodies tonight. We don't need to be quite that cute.
Would you go Aldridge and Drummond or AD and Jarrett Allen for DK cash?
For cash, I would play Aldridge and Drummond.
Iggy or Kyle Korver for a FanDuel GPP?
I would actually play Korver tonight. Not a lot of days that I would land that way, but tonight is going to be one of them.
Al-Farouq Aminu or Jason Tatum for a GPP? No site given.
I'll go with Aminu.
All right, got all the Slack questions heading over to YouTube now, so you better have something good for me, YouTube, besides a like, which you should also be giving right now, YouTube. Thoughts on Rodney Hood revenge versus Royce O'Neal on DK?
Yeah, whatever. No.
Alec Burks revenge, more appealing.
Yeah, there's all kinds of revenge in that game. It's just a really shitty environment. Those two teams played a couple weeks ago. I don't think a Cav got to 30 fantasy points, and that was in Cleveland. And they got their shit thoroughly pushed well in. So literally, my Cavs list would be Ante Zizic, and then down, 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 down. Whichever of these guys ends up cheapest among the starters, and then like down, 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 Cameron Payne. But it's you're gonna really need something to go a little bit strange for anyone to be very good in this spot.
I still support Burks. I think the rebounding upside is going to be there. I think you control rebounding, you control assists, and if it's a revenge game spot, those are two things that he does do well when he's motivated to do so.
Yeah, but it's like Gobert in favors. Like, I don't care how well you think you do it. Like, there's just a really bad environment.
He was going to know better than the guy who practiced with him for years.
No, I know. I'm just saying I want to play Alec Burks because I like his rebounding upside in Utah is frightening for me. Like,
you know what? It's a fair point. Well, okay, how about this? I would put pretty good odds on Alec Burks at least trying to throw one down on Gobert today.
Okay, that's fun. And I don't think Alec Burks is out of play in a tournament. I mean, it's a reasonably big slate. There's a lot of money floating around. You know, knock yourself out and have a little fun and like get funky with it. But I'm certainly not like, oh yeah, can't wait to. Yeah.
You know, that's fair. Not sure which site this is, but Ariana Freetoss in the YouTube chat asking, would you go Unibrow and Hood or Durant and Harrell?
I'll go Durant and Harrell. I can't get behind Hood. I understand, like on Yahoo and stuff, he's I think maybe literally still the minimum on Yahoo. So okay, I get at that point where he's literally $10, which sort of plays like about 2,000 on DraftKings. I get playing Rodney Hood. At that point, you're ecstatic if you randomly hit your upside of 30. So okay, I can kind of see that coming to pass. But
Donovan Mitchell or Drew on FanDuel?
Donovan Mitchell in a vacuum. I like Drew Holiday maybe a bit more in a tournament, but it's pretty similar. It's going to depend more on correlations than anything else with those two players. But I will probably play Mitchell and Cash and Drew in a tournament more often than not.
Mirotic or Wiggins for DK GPP?
I'll go Mirotic again.
How about Dion Waiters in a GPP as a concept?
I think it's fine where he's obviously very towards the floor in price range. We're locked. We have a message. I live in Ohio also. Are you ready for a bunch of snow? We going to the nightclub tonight?
How much are you going to get there?
I have no idea. It depends from where you measure. Oh, God, it's just a joke that keeps on giving. So good.
That's funny. Yeah, no good questions left. Yeah, no snow here in LA, but it's been raining all week, and it's been kind of depressing, to be honest. A little bit of 2 inches of rain a day will really ruin the town.
I believe you. I should be looking for ownership. 8 to 10 inches in Chicago. Well then.
Depends where you measure it from.
Obviously the measurement of snowfall will depend where you measure.
I think that should just be a phrase when you break out from time to time.
I'm gonna try to popularize it. We have talked about, so we have some clothing that they've said if you'll tell us what you want, we'll send it to you and you can wear it on the show for our delicious Awesemo brand, and I should really do that. But additionally, they're like, we are not disposed to getting like branded things, so like a picture of my face and Daddy likes over or under it or something, or hopefully a more attractive version of my face, but maybe. I definitely think, Fan Steady Fear. It depends from where you measure. I like that shirt. Like that now I'm excited about. So I'm gonna push to get that shirt made, absolutely.
Fast Steady Fear Fridays. That should be your thing.
Fast Steady Fridays.
You just host every show on Fridays.
There were times it was like that. Back in my younger days. By the way, what is Big Burrito?
So that's Adam's nickname for Marcus Sol, I believe, or a nickname they came up with, but feels kind of racist because they don't eat burritos in Spain.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's not Mexican. He's Spanish, and I do think
No,
burritos are
you know,
more.
sometimes a very white company when you're a little bit Latino as I am. Like, I don't care, but like, not the best nickname. Like, it's funny though, but not the best nickname.
Interesting.
Big tapas plate would be more accurate.
You're Latino? Sorry, how do you get that? I don't know if you've seen.
Little
I don't know if you've ever seen
poquito
Super.
Puerto Rican.
Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen Super Troopers. Ramathorn walks into the bar at the beginning, and the
Uh,
made out to
you're right.
be backward country cops are like, "Hey waiter, get me 2 tacos and a couple of enchiladas," and he is quite clearly of Indian descent, of subcontinent Indian descent. His name is Arkosh Ramathorn or something like that, and you know. And they're like, bring us a couple of tacos. And one of the other cops is like, tacos? And he's like, they think I'm Mexican. And the other cop's like, you're not Mexican?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, ethnicity is kind of like a Rorschach test. Like I've had Asian people who've angrily accused me while pointing and gesturing, like you're Asian, and I'm like, no, I'm not Asian. And like Italian people usually think I'm Italian, which I mostly am, and Greek people usually recognize the Greek feature. I have like Greek curly hair things, so I don't care. But Marcus Sol, big tapas plate. Let's fight back.
Big
It's a big
tapas. I
group.
like that. Big tapas. Let's go with that. That's nice. I didn't know because someone said, "What do you think about Big Burrito tonight?" And like 2 people said it to me, and I assumed I was being trolled. There was some conspiracy of people. So Big Burrito is Marcus All. Okay, now I know. That's good information to have at hand. I both my parents were adopted at the age of under 1 day back when they didn't keep very effective records. So I have never 23andMe or whatever it is, and I have absolutely no idea of my genealogy, which has led to me being claimed by various groups. I've gotten, oh, you're
Yep.
clearly Persian or Italian or this, that, or like I've gotten quite a bit of, especially when I was doing a lot of theater and stuff. They're a little bit looks obsessed. So
Yeah,
that was
similar
a
for
real
mine. My
thing.
dad was adopted too, so I actually don't fully know mine. I might be a little bit Filipino, but I haven't cared to look. My mom got me Ancestry.com, like their test for Christmas. I really don't want to give my DNA to a major company who, like, I've had my credit score hacked by Experian. Like, I don't need my DNA hacked to end up in some Black Mirror shit where like my virtual consciousness is in an app all of a sudden, like doing some shit for somebody else.
Jesus
I'm not
Christ!
about that life.
Between you and Engelman, every show I have, I'm trying to talk about basketball. You guys are like, our universe is an illusion. Everyone's out to get me. Like it's just all right.
It's a lot of drugs going on in the Josh and
That
Spags
is,
Engelman experiences.
you guys are great. All right, so here's our brief. Lillard or Drew on DK. I'll save the $600 and play Drew, probably in cash and tournaments, barely. I don't know if you got to take there, Chris.
Yeah, I think Drew's fair. I'm with you on that.
All right, here we go with some ownership real quick. Aaron Gordon, 32.32% ownership. I guess dislike on that. That's getting a little high there for a player I think we've now established has a downside even in a good matchup. Tyler Johnson, 21. That got there fast, but that's about right. I'm not killing myself to get there. I think people in general are probably overestimating the number of minutes you get out of him. But again, he's just sort of off guarding it. And they have a lot of guys to come in and cover a lot of those minutes. So again, I think you get in the mid-20s in minutes, and that's fine. There's not a lot of outstanding value, but I would have him projected a good 4 or 5 points less than say Bonte Zizic among others. Vooch 20%, that feels just fine. Jonathan Isaac 15%. All right, that
Pops
seems
up a
little
lot on the
high for-
optimizers. I had to mute him.
What happened?
He pops up a lot on the on Fantasy Cruncher and my projections too. To be honest, he came up quite a bit, and I was like, "This isn't the fucking thing, man."
Interesting. I mean, they're swelling up his minutes a little bit. He is, perfectly good. I thought at the beginning of the year, a player I really liked. I thought he could put up a lot of, defensive numbers. I thought he'd stick in his role a little bit more. And they finally, largely expurgated Jonathan Simmons from the rotation, so he's a little bit more solid. But just he's just not putting up upside games. Like I don't know how many 30-point games Jonathan Isaac has this year, but it's 1 or 2, and I'm pretty sure the 40 number is 0. Like he just struggles to produce. So it's interesting that the number got that high. I guess Daddy doesn't like that at 15% in a neutral matchup. Justice Winslow 14%. Daddy likes that. That feels pretty good. Blake Griffin 14 feels fine. D'Angelo 11. Obviously I like that a little bit. Hassan at 9, Daddy likes that. Jared Allen at 9, Daddy likes that. Evan Fournier, 8.6. I'm fine with that. Joe Harris, 8.5. Probably would get away from that with everything going on in that rotation, but he is one of the more secure guys there. Omri Caspi, 7.7. Yeah, Daddy doesn't like that. He saw a pile of minutes in the last game where he went all the way up to like 36 minutes, but there were a couple other guys in foul trouble. and the game got out of hand, which there was. I was very happy with the JaMychal Green call and performance on
Yeah,
Wednesday.
that hurt.
That
He's been my dude, and I just didn't. He was blind to me, and
Oh yeah, it was you and me, and I was talking him up, and he went
I
off. You
know.
must have felt
I've been the
best.
most JaMychal guy I think we have at the company. I've hyped him too many
You
times,
and I
and that
have
was
argued on the opposite side of that. I don't know if you and I remember. We had basically a gentleman's bet where you were like, JaMychal Green, my
that's
guy.
right. So it was you. I wasn't sure, but yes,
Yeah,
that's
it
it.
was you and me, and I had someone else. So yeah, that's really got to sting for you. But that's really got to suck. Tell us more about how that feels.
Every day I'm in pain. Every day I'm in agony.
But it needed a lot of luck for that to work out the way it did, and I don't think you get 36 minutes out of Omri Caspi on a day in general or today. I think he's back down to 25, 26 minutes, and that makes him less exciting, but he's pretty cheap, so it's not like you're dying here. Dinwiddie at 6.4, I'm fine with that. If you have D'Angelo at 11, that's the recency did not sway that so much. So that's where that is. Augustine 6.1, Marcus Smart 5.9. He's cheap. Drummond 5.9. I like that a lot. Irving 5.7. That's fine. Wade 5.3. That's fine. Waiters 5.1. That's fine. Reggie number 1 5%. That's fine. Conley 5%. I really like that. I'm a fan of Conley at 5% and 7,000. He can get to 50 tonight. I wouldn't be shocked. So I like that. Kuruk's 4.6, little dubious but doable. Terrence Ross 4.4, again, price is getting up there. Tatum 4%, sure. JaMychal Green 3.53, okay. Mark Gasol 3.2, I really like that, and I thought he would be more popular than that at 6,800. Again, a couple games ago was dog shit and terrible and had hand numbness and his elbow was all jacked up. Last game looked a lot better and didn't play that much because of a blowout. Game only ended 10, 11 points or something, but they were up 20-something going into the fourth quarter, and they just let the bench largely close it, and JaMychal Green, etc. But Marcus Gasol at 6,800 at 3%, I really like that a lot. Horford at 3.1 is certainly just fine. Adebayo 2.6, sure. Justin Holiday 2.5. I really don't hate that. He missed most of the first quarter. I think I think they gave him none of the second quarter. He got 2 fouls in 5 minutes and then didn't play till after half, I think, after getting the start. And then played 12, 14 minutes again in the second half. So I think there's a chance he plays 28 minutes tonight. And he's really cheap. He's dreadful, especially on that team, but Justin Holiday you can do. Jaylen Brown at that price, 2.2%, doesn't bother me. Reggie number 2, Reggie Jackson, 2.2%. It's obviously been tough to peg this year. There's obviously still an upside, but with Itch back, a little bit dicier. Rodney Magruder, 1.9, sure. Kelly O, 1.7. Mo Bamba, 1.6. Is he back?
I think he's still questionable. I didn't see him ruled out.
Yeah, I was about to say, that seems a little dicey. I didn't get officially he's back. Marcus Morris, 1.5, sure. Jaren Jackson Jr., 1.5, I love. That guy should just never be 1.5%. There's too much goddamn upside. So I love Jaren Jackson Jr. at 1.5. Derek Harrod at 1.34 is dead to me. Derek Jones at 1.3, that makes a lot of sense. You got a couple guys out there. You're trending back into the possibility of an upside. Would like him more on Yahoo or FanDuel, probably. But that's fine. Luke Kennard, 1.25, no thank you. Trevion Graham, 0.84. Javon Carter, again, I have no idea what they'll do with his minutes. There's a lot of trends that say he should get 30, a lot of trends that say he's going to get 12, so I'll be interested to see how that works out. James Johnson, 0.73, I like. Shelvin Mack, one of the guys who, again, did not get the run last game, 0.6. Rondé, 0.6. You're asking for a lot there. He played 7 minutes last game. Jarrett Temple, 0.55. Shabazz, 0.46.
Rudy.
I love the Jello. Terry Rozier, 0.44. Ed Davis, 0.24. That could happen. Daniel Tice, 0.22. Langston Galloway, 0.22. Aaron Baines, 0.20. Wayne Ellington, 0.19. Actually played last game. Bruce Brown, 0.16. Isaiah Briscoe, 0.16. Josh Richardson, 0.16. Congratulations. You played yourself.
Ooh. Did you Watanabe make the cut?
I do not yet see Yuta Watanabe, who we've established as of Japanese ancestry.
Utah. We were talking before we came on the air about how proud we were of the first Japanese basketball player getting some minutes. Or maybe not the first, but the most recent one getting some minutes.
Yep.
Rooting for Big Japan. And also, just to close the loop on the Big Burrito, apparently it's a basketball reference nickname, so I don't want to misattribute anybody. So they are the ones who are perhaps not keeping tabs on their Latinx world.
Oh, you can get anything uploaded to there if you spend a little time. I'm gonna somehow get Marcus All to have a registered nickname on that site of Adam Scherer or something.
What? Ship my modem.
Just gonna meta him right out. He's like, what?
All right, that's it. Any notes you want to touch on before we call it quits and I do the closing spiel?
No, I'm today. I'm tomorrow. I'm actually not going to do Sunday. Sunday is a particularly dreadful 3 game slate thing, and the people who run this fine slate were like, "Hey, we don't want to pay you for that crap." And I'm like, "All right, that's a fair point." So I'm not gonna. I'll be here tomorrow. I'll be off again on. I've scheduled out the rest of the month, so I'll be here not Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and every other day for the rest of the month. So today on, tomorrow on, one off, one on, one off, one on, one off, and then like 7 on. So.
All right, so there you go. And I'll be back on Sunday. Check out On the Contrary now with me, Evan Silva, and Osimo. That's previewing the NFL Conference Championships, of course, in the way that we do that, dig real deep on them. Same thing we do on this show. And I'll be back on Sunday. We have me, Laffy, Ben Rasa, and Josh doing a little roundtable, a little 4-man weave we're doing right before the games. I think 1 p.m. Eastern is when that'll be live, so check that out. Use that promo code live before lock. Get 50% off your first month at osmo.com. All the stuff that we talk about here available at your fingertips, half off that first month. Get in there now while the getting's good. And thank you to Thrive Fantasy. Download their app as well. They support the show. Use promo code, use bit.ly/Osmo to get in there, get all the deposit bonuses, $10 on a $10 deposit, $20 on $100, and $50 on $200 or more. So go get in there now at Thrive Fantasy. And we'll be back in soon. I'll be here tomorrow for you guys, and we'll see you talking sports very soon. Enjoy your weekend.
Utah Watanabe.